I recently moved house, and that meant that I had to take apart and tear down my drum room. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to show you how I rebuilt it in my new place. But there's a catch. I don't have an unlimited budget, and the new place is a rental. Leading up to this rebuild, I watched a lot of videos on how to build a soundproof room and how to treat it acoustically. I've also watched some beautiful drum room builds by the likes of Austin Bircham and Carter McLean. I'll mention a few more along the way, but watching these videos gave me the impression that I couldn't afford a lot of what they were doing, so I had to figure out what was truly necessary for my needs and leave out the luxury items. Now, I'll start by saying that this is the third time I've built this room. And when I say build, I mean I passed the screws and spanner, or whatever you call it, to the guy who was actually doing the work. The first room was a 2.4 metre cube, and that literally cost me a little over $1,000 to build. My friend Nick is a carpenter by trade and also a drummer, and we built it together about 10 years ago. In 2023, I moved house again and rebuilt it, this time with the help from my brother-in-law, Emil. We doubled the size of the room to about 2.4 metres wide and 4.7 metres long. With the doubling in size and material prices, it costs an extra $2,000 to build. Every time I moved the room, I have aimed to upgrade a few things. The first move, we doubled the size, so that used up all of my budget. And this move was to improve the soundproofing and internal look, but more on that later. It took me about a day and a half to tear down the room, ready for the moving truck to transport it to the next place. It was really important to me that I reused as much of the parts as possible, as I couldn't afford to start all over again. This included the many plaster sheets, the frame, the roof, the carpet, and acoustic foam. The only part I couldn't reuse was the door, apart from one bit of MDF from it. And again, more on that later. Now, I've got to give it up for my brother-in-law, Emil. He is a builder by trade and has an incredible eye for the tiny details. The first part of the rebuild was to construct the frame that went up against the back wall and one of the side frames. Now, with my garage, there is roughly a 50mm drop from the back to the front. It was important that we make the frame as level as possible, so we needed to fill out the bottom with packers and spare timber. Once this was done, we finished plastering the wall side, then shifted the whole frame against the wall. We then attached the rest of the frame and roof. The basic construction consists of a frame fitted with insulation bats, 3 layers of regular plaster sheets inside and out, and the roof is MDF board with 1 layer of plaster boards inside and out, along with a layer of insulation. The outside measurements of the room are 4.7 metres long, 2.4 wide and 2.1 high, and fits in perfectly to one side of my double car garage. From this point, I got to work on the insulation bats. We went with simple R3.5 ceiling insulation. Yes, I could have gone for rock wool or a more soundproofing option, but these were within my budget and still a massive upgrade from the hollow frames I had in the past rooms. Emil built the door jamb, then we finished the rest of the plastering. As we reused as much plasterboard as possible, this became very time consuming, creating heaps of small puzzle pieces that had to fit together. But again, I didn't have to buy any extra boards.
We're halfway there. Last one? No. Oh. Okay.
The next upgrade from the previous build was that I decided I wanted a solid soundproof door. I researched a ton of videos on how to do this, and I settled with a single door version based on a video from the Soundproof Your Studio channel. I also decided that I wanted perimeter seals and automatic drop seals for extra airlock. Emil first routed out a channel at the bottom of the door for the drop seal to go in. He then created a hole for the handle and lock to go in.
Lock bar go in.
Okay.
Can't get in.
What are you gonna do?
Use the key.
What for?
Open the door.
What
Unlock
does it
it. Unlock the door.
Whoa.
Look at that.
That's magical.
What a door.
What a door. We then put a layer of sheet lead sandwiched between the solid door and a layer of MDF board from the previous door. The idea here is that you want as much mass as possible. Many studios have a double door setup, but again, this is what I could afford, which was already a massive upgrade. Emil then installed perimeter seals on the side and top of the door jamb, which creates an airtight seal, resulting in minimal travel of sound. We went with a double drop seal design, one which is recessed in the bottom of the door and one that sits outside. The idea is that when the door closes, these seals automatically drop to the floor. As you know, with studios of this nature, power is super important, but the challenge here is that I'm renting and I can't get an electrician to attach power to the mains. So what we did was simply drill a hole big enough to fit extension cords in. I have them plugged into two separate outlets which are on separate fuses. Once the cords were pushed through the hole, I filled it with as much spare acoustic foam that I could fit. At this point, I high-fived Emil, said see you later, and started on the inside. I put a layer of carpet on the floor, then rolled out my colourful Temu rug. I also use a square of carpet that I attach to the ceiling above my drum kit, which makes it easier to attach cameras, lights and microphones. The remainder of the walls are covered in acoustic foam sheets. My third and final upgrade was that instead of having acoustic foam as my backdrop, I wanted acoustic wood panels. Not exactly sure where I got the idea from, but I realised later that Austin Bertram had almost the exact same ones. The great thing about these panels is that you can order sample boxes from many companies. I did so and realised that the premium ones had the wooden veneer on 3 sides of the panels. Most of the cheaper options only had it on the front. It was important to me that all 3 sides were covered, as this camera is at a slight angle, but also they're much nicer than the others I found. If you end up getting these, make sure you get black temper screws to attach them. This hides them better from the camera than regular metal screws. These panels are from a company in Brisbane called Lux Panels. Okay, that's pretty much the construction of the room, so I thought I'd now give you a rundown of what gear I use, and we're going to start with my Gretsch drums. These are a set of Gretsch Playboy drums from 1967, and I bought these from Steel at Kentville Drums. The bass drum is 20 by 14, floor tom is 14 by 14, and I also have a 12 by 8 inch rack that I use in lessons and recording. And the snare is a 14 by 5 aluminum. I play Bosphorus cymbals, and these hats are 12-inch syncopation series that I picked up from the factory, and this ride is a 22-inch Masters vintage. It's my absolute favourite cymbal in my entire collection. All drums have Kentville kangaroo hide on both bottom and top. I'm also using a Gretsch floating action pedal that is original and came with the kit, and it's got an innovative percussion Jim Riley kick beater. It's super smooth and unlike any pedal I've ever played. I do a bit of face-to-face teaching in this room, so when my students come over they get to play my Les Soprano kit. This was the first kit I ever bought and I saved for about 6 months to pay it off. It's a gorgeous looking kit and sounds incredible. It's constructed with 6-ply maple shells with handmade brass hardware. Sizes are 20 by 16, 14 by 14 floor, 12 by 8 rack and a 14 by 4 inch snare. The snare has an old Evans Genera Dry and the toms have Evans Strata 1000 heads on them. There's also an EMAD on the kick. And this is from the student's perspective. Want to have a lesson or 7? Book a time below. These are all the cables before they were plugged in. There's XLR, power and HDMI cables, and there's literally bucket loads of them. As I record many videos in this room, it's vital that these are hidden as best as possible. What I ended up doing was getting a few of what's called trunking cable management. They're basically a safe way of organising and hiding cables that can be attached to the ceiling and walls. Within these, I've got HDMI cables going from the cameras to the video switcher. I've got an extension power cable running to the other side of the room to a power board, which runs 2 of the cameras and all of the lights. And there's also XLR cables going from microphones to the desk. Every cable is now tucked away in the trunking and it keeps me sane. All of the lights and cameras have these annoying power boxes, and in the previous build I attached them to the ceiling with cables and clamps, but that was super messy. This time I got an offcut of the wood panels and made a little shelf on the ceiling. Now all of these boxes sit on top of that and it looks way nicer. All of the important equipment, like my preamps, audio interface and video switcher, are powered via a Furman power conditioner. Now onto my cameras. When I started making videos, I first used my iPhone, but the battery wasn't good for long form content. I then went to a GoPro Hero 4, but that wasn't great in low light. So I decided I wanted to get a DSLR. Upon researching and talking to experts about affordable solutions, I settled on the Panasonic G7. This was an entry-level micro four thirds camera, and there were heaps of great lenses that it could take. After a year of using that, I bought another one. Then after a year of using that, I bought yet again another one. The first G7 was brand new, but the next two were used but in excellent condition. After a year of that, I decided I want to go a little more profesh and ended up buying a Panasonic GH5. These 4 cameras, along with a couple of new lenses and a few used lenses, give me everything I need for videos. And I am not upgrading these anytime soon, said no drummer ever. The front camera is the GH5 with a 9mm lens. It is a wide lens, but it gets everything in the shot without too much distortion. The face camera is a G7 with a 20mm lens. It gives the shot a nice depth of field, and I also attach my teleprompter to it. The over-the-shoulder camera is a G7 with a 12 to 35mm zoom lens. This is good for when I need to go up close on my hands to show specific techniques. And finally, the overhead is a G7, also with a 12 to 35mm lens. All of these cameras go into a Blackmagic A10 Mini. I bought this when I started teaching online just before the lockdowns. It's a video switcher that allows me to select the camera the student sees. It's an awesome bit of kit for my students. Now onto the lights. The light over the Les Soprano kit is a Neewer NL660 bicolor LED light. When I'm recording videos, I turn it around to light up the side of my Gretsch kit. For my face, I've got an Ambitful FL80 with a 70cm light dome. And the top light is another Neewer LED light. In the corner, I've got a Nanlite Parvo Bulb 10C. This sits behind the bobblehead version of me, except I haven't found that since we moved. And attached to the ceiling is a Nanlite Parvo Tube 15C, and this gives a little warm light to the wood panels. I think it looks just great. Both of these lights are controlled by an app, which is super convenient. Okay, now onto the microphones. Above the Les Soprano kit is a large diaphragm condenser called the Aston Origin. This is one of those mics that you simply point at the instrument, and through the headphones it just sounds exactly the same. I also use this as a room mic when I'm recording vids and tracking songs. My 2 kick mics are made by Dr. Aileen Smith over in Perth, Western Australia. The first one is the sub mic, which picks up all the low end beautifully. The other is an Alien 8. These work fantastic in combination. I have a Shure SM57 in the knee mic position, and I sometimes use it with a Dr. Aileen Smith dirt box. This allows you to sound like you're coming through a distortion pedal. The snare mic is an Octava MK12 and is my favourite mic for brushes. My overhead is a stereo ribbon mic made by Nude Microphones, based in South Australia. It's a killer mic and I never have any phase issues. I've got it positioned about 20 centimeters above my head. And the last one is my vocal mic, which is the Sennheiser MKE600. Last year I invested in an incredible bit of gear. It's a 500 series chassis called the Cranbourne Audio 500 R8. It takes 8 500 series modules, but it's also an audio interface, a summing mixer and a headphone amp. My overhead left and right is going into 2 SSL 6 500 series preamps, and all the other mics are each going into a Cranbourne Audio Camden 500 preamp. I'm still learning how to get the most out of this setup, but it's already sounding incredible. For my online lessons, I have each of these channels from the Cranbourne R8 going into a PreSonus AR12, which is a hybrid analog digital interface / mixer. This connects to my laptop via USB. I like to attach as much equipment as I can to the walls and ceiling, and I do this with the help of these Neewer ceiling mounts. I attach my lights, microphones and cameras, and it avoids the use of stands which takes up a lot of floor space. I also got these Neewer magic arms which allows me to maneuver my gear in whatever angle or position I like. And last of all, for my face-to-face students, I've got a PreSonus headphone amp plus a pile of various ProLogix pads. Now in terms of the cost to build this room, it's a little blurry. My first room was a 2.4 meter cube my friend Nick and I built around 10 years ago, and I spent a little over $1,000. 2 years ago, my brother-in-law and I doubled the size of the room and spent another $2,000 in materials. With this build, I spent another $2,000, which included the solid door, insulation bats, lead sheeting, door seals, and wood panels. Not including all of the gear that lives inside the room, I've spent around $5,000 in building materials. However, if we built the room exactly the same from scratch today, it would easily cost around $8,000 or higher with the cost of materials these days. As I mentioned earlier, I decided to upgrade a few things along the way which were optional add-ons. If you were to build a room today big enough for one drum kit and kept it simple, I imagine you could get away with a few grand in materials. Now the cost of labour, that's a whole other story. Let me just say that I am super lucky to have family that have skills. Thanks for watching.